All right, y'all. I appreciate you being here. My name is Brayden Robinson. I am a person in long-term recovery. I've been in recovery for about 6 years. I am also the executive director of the Utah Peer Network, an organization that is dedicated to supporting all of you, everyone who is a peer specialist by the state of Utah. We work to support our workforce and our profession. What we're going to be talking today about is what I just refer to as community engaged peer support. And it's basically peer support outside of our agency and the peers that we work with in our broader community, at the legislative level, advocacy in general, in a variety of different ways. So basically, our objectives for today are to demonstrate understanding of this concept of community engaged peer support, how to use it, how we can better advocate for ourselves, for the peers that we work with, for our organizations, and for our communities. We're going to dive into committees and coalitions. Who here has participated in a committee at some point? A lot of people. What about a coalition? Similar? Who can tell me what the difference is?
Coalitions, multiple agencies, partners coming together to collaborate on an idea.
Yeah, great. We'll just skip those slides then. How about that? Just kidding. As well as, so something that, I'm also a social worker. I just graduated my master's in social work. And one of the things that I really loved about that education is talking a lot about community organizing. And I'll talk about how that intersects and overlaps with peer support and how we can utilize that kind of skill set in our work. If you have any questions throughout, feel free to stop me and I'm happy to answer questions. I'll also leave some time at the end for questions and answers as well. So basically the idea behind this concept is that we're using our voice and our story to advocate effectively is an important piece of that, right? Because we can advocate ineffectively outside of our organization in the community. Who here would say that they do that on a somewhat regular basis, advocating outside of our own agency? Perfect. Then we're in the right spot. Awesome. The barriers we experience as peer specialists are bigger than us or our clients, right? So I don't know about y'all, but when I was in a direct service role as a peer support specialist, the most frustrating part of my job was trying to support my peers and running into a million different barriers all the time, right? So this concept, advocacy in general, helps us to remove or eliminate those barriers. It often takes a long time, it can be very frustrating, but we can do that, right? So that's why we're here to talk about it. Some of the core ideas of this concept for me are collaboration with partners. I don't know of a single social justice issue or barrier that's been removed or taken care of by an individual. It's always been a team effort, a community effort, people banding together to work on issues together. It's openness to diverse ideas and beliefs, right? We can't come together as a community with our varying ideas, beliefs, and backgrounds and fight amongst each other and get anything done, right? Collaboration in our community. So again, it's having those, in some of my jobs, I've had kind of blinders on, right? Working in my agency, just trying to survive all the challenges of my own agency and the barriers that I run into. But it's important that we partner with others in a similar space with similar goals. This one is probably the most important for me, is centering the voice of peer voices, right? Lived and living experience. Our background in recovery, with our substance use or our mental health or both, really making that the primary tool, as it is when we work directly with a peer, but we use that lived experience publicly to create change. And then of course, again, just having us all on the same team, which can be one of the most challenging aspects of advocacy, of community organizing, because we all have different ideas, goals, agendas, right? And getting everybody on the same track with those kind of things can be tough, but definitely not impossible. So kind of the three key areas of this presentation are going to be talking about coalitions and committees, and kind of the difference between the two, which we talked already a little bit about. Advocacy and its different levels, right? It's different to advocate for myself than it is to advocate for my organization, right? Different barriers, different situations, different contexts. And then we'll talk about that community organizing piece, which I really like this definition, which is community building depends on identifying, developing, and sustaining relationships. Central to being successful in those relationships is community leadership, right? So again, this entire concept, this entire skill set, really at the end of the day comes down to building relationships. with individuals, with other partner organizations. It really comes down to our ability to be a good ally for our partners, to work together with them, and hopefully work towards mutual goals, right? So coalitions. As it was mentioned earlier, a coalition generally is a temporary unit of organization members founded on a community need or issue. It's meant to build connections and relationships to address the issue. It's collaborative in nature and is meant to foster innovation and problem solving, right? These tend to grow and include larger organizations. They can be longer term. So you generally see like the Salt Lake Valley Coalition and homelessness, right? So a ton of different organizations all working towards the same goal of ending homelessness, right? To contrast that, committees tend to be a group of people with shared interests or concerns that come together for a task or for like a situation. They can tend to be shorter term, and they can be made up of a variety of organizations. Just general community members can join typically, and they don't tend to be as large, but they certainly can be. And so they're very similar, and in practice, in my experience so far, they tend to be used interchangeably a lot. But those are some of the specific differences, and we'll talk about how to get involved in them right now. So, for me, in my experience with Utah Peer Network and before that, showing up and being involved in committees, coalitions, really comes down to preparation, right? Have any of y'all attended a committee or a coalition where people show up just to show up? Just to be seen, right? Yeah? Is that a fun experience?
No.
No? Why not?
Because we're not prepared.
Because they're not prepared? Why else?
It's like a waste of time.
A waste of time?
It's sidetracked easily.
Sidetracked easily? No direction, no purpose, right?
People are usually there for their own agenda too.
For sure, for sure. And that can be a soul-sucking experience, at least it is for me. Because, and I've been that person showing up for that reason too, just to be very clear. And for me, preparation, coming to the meeting prepared, I've read the agenda. A good coalition or committee, any kind of community meeting is going to have a good agenda. It's going to have minutes from the prior meeting, right? And if I'm showing up to this coalition or committee, I want to feel prepared. I want to read those things before I come in so that I know what we're talking about. I know where I stand. I know where my organization stands, because those may be different, right? We want to know all of those things ahead of time before we walk in, potentially put our foot in our mouth, right? In this very public setting. And so the last piece of that is really knowing that when we're walking into these spaces, when we're wearing our peer support hat, so to speak, we want to make sure that we're representing that, right? Back to our conversation yesterday, for those of you that were there for the ethics panel, we want to make sure that we're representing our profession when we're in these public forums and in these public settings, right? So being prepared is definitely step number one. And you all mentioned this as well, engagement, right? Why is engagement an important part of any community coalition or committee?
To learn.
To learn.
Share. Collaboration.
When you show up to a meeting and it's super engaging, everyone's fired up and locked in and wanting to create change together, how is that different from our example of the disengaged, unprepared? How does it feel? What's the feeling?
More impactful.
Disconnected?
Things get done.
Things get done? Totally, right? It's the same thing for a staff meeting at your job, right? If everyone's checked out on their phones and emailing the whole time, then no one cares about this meeting or the content of it, right? So for me, we can't ever control the other people in this meeting, right? A lot of these meetings come down to their leadership. They have a chair or a secretary, whoever's facilitating the group. That's an important position because that person's going to guide the energy of the group, right? So if we have that position, that's great. We can show up engaged, prepared, send out the agenda, send out the minutes, all of those kind of things. If we're not in that position, I still can show up and be engaged and try to lift the energy of the whole group, right? If I come into it, one person, I've had this experience watching someone else come into some of these kinds of meetings, fired up and passionate, and have it kind of be contagious for the rest of the group, right? So engagement, come with our pure energy and our passion. I've never met a peer that isn't passionate and full of energy and wanting to change the freaking world, right? So we can take that energy into all of these kinds of settings and really change the landscape of that group. Yeah, please.
I think it's also important though that you have kind of a timeline and that you create almost sort of backwards planning. Because we've all sat on committees where all they do is meet and no action plan is ever initiated. And so I think it's also important that, you know, that be part of the agenda so that when we meet the next time, we can report back and identify next steps.
Totally. Right. There's got to be some measure of accountability for the work that we're doing, right? And that's another piece of this kind of work is there's got to be accountability baked in. We'll talk about that in just a second. So beat you to it. Yeah.
So with what he's talking about, does that bring kind of committees and coalitions together? You know what I mean? So like a committee would meet about it and then a coalition would kind of take action, right?
I mean, it could. Generally, I think committees and coalitions tend to operate separately, right? I mean, they could be on similar topics in similar spaces. Maybe they collaborate. But I think that a committee can definitely take action and should take action. You know, back to that definition, they're usually brought together to accomplish something. So there's a committee on changing this policy issue, right? And so we're bringing everybody together, pooling our resources and trying to change this one task.
But you may have committees within agencies
Totally,
that then say, let's go out and find partners.
for sure.
You know, and that's where the committee could lead to a coalition.
Absolutely, absolutely, that's a great point. Great point. So that brings us to collaboration, right? In general, in the peer movement, for sure here in Utah, and from my experience, you know, in other states, it tends to be the same. We all want to work together in general, right? We have that spirit of collaboration. In these kinds of group contexts, though, we have competing agendas, we have different opinions, ideas, and beliefs about how to get things done, and that can create conflict, right? So, coming into these spaces, we want to maintain that collaborative spirit where, and I've terribly failed at this at times, right? It's hard not to, when you care so much about an issue, to not have your ego or your emotions get involved, right? So it's important when we're in these spaces to be mindful of that and check ourselves in how we are operating within this group, right? We want to see how we can support others in the group. We want to work for the group, not ourselves or our organization's agenda. We want to be able to try to collaborate and converse around melding all of these things together in a unified kind of goal and direction, right? Which, like I said, is not always an easy task, especially depending upon the emotional weight of the issue. If you're talking about overdose deaths and naloxone, if you're talking about severe and persistent mental illness, and that's our experience, then it's going to be challenging, for sure. A well-organized coalition or committee will have either a defined mission statement and a purpose and a plan and a direction, or at least the general group will know what that direction is through conversation and those kind of things, right? Which brings us to our last point around being organized. If we are in a leadership position on one of these groups, we want to make sure that we're well organized, that we're organizing our notes, our minutes, our agendas very well so they're easy for people to read. Who in this room has a ton of free time in their role? I didn't think so, right? Most of us don't. And so that being said, every one of these coalition and committee meetings are an ask on our time and on our energy, right? And so to our earlier point, one of the reasons we don't like those disengaged, unprepared meetings is because they are taking our time and not utilizing it effectively, right? And so when we show up, we want to be organized with our thoughts, our ideas for the group. Which brings us to showing up. Yeah.
Well, I have attended several committees, and one of the issues most of the time is diversity and inclusion.
Can you say that one more time?
Diversity and
Yeah, for sure.
So, and this problematic aspect of diversity and inclusion is how can we come together to make some decision that can drive results. Okay, so in your experience, how this can be done in the way that we show up effectively.
Yeah, that's a big question. I mean, I think hopefully, for me, the group has a measure of respect for each other to have open and transparent conversations and disagree in a way that's healthy and moves the conversation forward, right? If that dynamic isn't within this group, then that conversation is probably not going to go very well. You know what I mean? And so for me, I always want to focus on what I bring to the group because I can't control others. I mean, I can control how I interact with others and the dynamics and the relationships within the group. But not everyone's going to show up 100% all the time in these spaces, right? It's just to say that hopefully I can be, if I am in a dynamic that's not entirely collaborative, I can be kind of a calming presence and try to mediate conflict, things like that. And if it's a great group, then I have the opportunity to encourage us to have those challenging conversations in a way that's productive. Does that answer your question?
It does, and I can also add up what I can call secret communication.
Okay. Can you tell me more about that?
Yes. So most of the time, like I said, I have attended several committees. People don't effectively communicate. They don't say exactly what is in their mind. And then after the meeting, they will get together as a group, as a tribe, as a team, and then they brought up the secret combinations.
Meeting after the meeting.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And then what's happened? It mess up the committee.
Totally.
Okay? And we will spend years of meetings. There is no positive result.
Totally.
Okay?
So, yeah. Yeah, so what I'm hearing from that is, A, don't do that, right? For sure. And B, I know Brayden Brown talks about that specific thing in some of her work. And I mean, her recommendation is, of course, not to do that, but when you see it happening, call it out, right? And talk about it and try to work through that. Because it's, I think, human nature to an extent to want to vent about your frustrations about any group setting, about any meeting. But the healthy and more productive way to go about that is to name it in the group and to work through it as a group, right? And hopefully the groups, again, dynamic and relationships support that. But it's tough. It's super tough. Which brings us to, that kind of covers committees and coalitions for now, but all of these kind of intersect and overlap, right? So last year at this conference, I presented with Evan Doan, who many of you know, who's just a rock star in his space, knows a million times more about these kinds of things than I do, but he's taught me a lot and has been a great mentor for me. We presented kind of a full presentation on this slide here, basically advocacy at different levels. So I've kind of included this as a callback to that and just to cover it within this conversation of advocacy, right? So basically, I see advocacy happening at 5 different levels. And these things overlap, they're related in many different ways. So it's not that they're black and white separated levels. But the first is self-advocacy, right? What does that look like for y'all in your jobs? How do you advocate for yourself?
Like your first one, setting boundaries and holding them.
How do you do that with your boss? Here's some laughs. Yeah.
Just say no. Big requests.
Depends on the boss, right?
Mine's in supervision usually.
In supervision, you advocate for yourself?
Yeah.
Okay.
I mean, that's kind of our time set aside once a week.
Yeah.
That we get to kind of unload everything that's going on, and then that's usually when the advocacy comes through. And sometimes it's not just advocacy, but like it's direction as well. Like
You're a supervisor or they're directing you?
no, they're helping me to direct how to advocate for whatever it is I'm trying to advocate.
Oh, cool. Yeah, totally. Well, sounds like you have very supportive supervision, which I love to hear.
Advocate for additional training and ongoing education and pay raises.
Yeah, I love that. I love that. Thank you for doing that. Yeah, for sure.
Like myself, along with a lot of people who do peer support, we're going back into spaces where we could have experienced a lot of trauma. So like for me, I have PTSD going back into some areas of high intensity. So my self-advocacy looks like, hey, I need certain support to thrive. If I had these things, I could do my job better.
I love that. Yeah.
I advocate for things that I'm passionate about. So working for the department, sometimes they're like, we just need these groups covered. And I'm like, well, anybody could teach out of these groups, right? It kind of takes away from what we have to offer with our lived experience. And so I only teach groups that I'm absolutely passionate about. So.
Do they love that when you do that?
No, but they, but they trust me, so they're like, hey,
Awesome.
like, I just push back and they accept it, so it's nice.
Awesome. Yeah, very cool. And I imagine, I mean, Missy, if I can pick on you for a second, we've talked about, because you're in a unique role, right? You're peer support in the Department of Corrections, where peer support wasn't previously. And so a big part of that is educational advocacy, right? If people don't understand our role inside of our organization, we have to provide education around that. Especially in the early days, it can be super rough, depending on how severe biases are and preconceived notions are about who we are as people with experience and our benefit to that organization. Yeah.
My name's Angie, and I was on the original board of UAPS,
Oh, cool.
vice president. But I fell off my treatment plan for a while and I'm back. But I wanted to thank you because I just got incarcerated by a correctional officer who is my husband.
Wow.
And when I was in jail for a night, I didn't know what my fate was. I reacted to abuse to a Scientologist. I asked for peer support. I asked the correctional officers, is there any peer support here? They looked at me like I was higher than a kite. I was like, is there someone I can talk to? Nobody talked to me. In fact, what happened was I was led into the jail cell and just left there. And the correctional officer that led me there led me to think that I was gonna get to talk to someone. But I didn't talk to anyone. He just put me in jail, shut the door, and that was it. So I just wanted to, I'm just really grateful for the community here and the voices that everybody has to share about their lived experience. And I don't ever want to go back there again because when I reached out for help and to talk to someone, nobody cared. So
Add to that,
Please.
I just, I worked at the Department of Corrections and Prison, and I was just talking with the people at the table here, and maybe you pioneered something.
I hope so. I want to write a book.
Department of Corrections just told me that they just started a peer program
Oh,
where
good.
they bring in
That's pretty
previous
spectacular.
inmates to help current
Yeah.
inmates.
So I want to make sure we don't go down a rabbit hole.
Okay.
So we still have contact covered, but yeah, please go ahead.
I think part one is advocating to the community permission to go into certain areas to set up and do your thing.
Yes.
I think as a supervisor, I appreciate honesty and openness. At the same time, one of the unique strengths of the peer program is the lived experience. And at the same time, though, it is a double-edged sword because of that lived experience, experience creates beliefs that aren't always true. And so I think it's important as peers work with their supervisors or work within an organization that they try and put themselves in the other position or walk a mile in the other person's shoes, because I think overall the whole community of peer support needs to remember grace. And I know we've all been blessed by that grace and supported by that grace, but that grace also goes both ways. Your supervisor is not always trying to make your life more difficult. Of course, they may have other people that they have to answer to. And, in my role as a supervisor, it's more administrative than it is peer support. But, for example, my team, my peer supports, they're awesome. But at the same time, their lived experience does affect the way that I have to manage and supervise them. And yet, I sometimes feel like they don't give me the same latitude or grace because of my lived experience. And so it's got to be a two-way street.
Sure.
just like peers show empathy and support to the people they help, their clients, they also need to do that with the rest of their team, with their supervisor and bosses and organizations. Because we're all in this for the right reason.
Absolutely. Thank you for sharing that. Yeah, I mean, I wish I had 2 hours to dive into that subject. In and of itself, supervision is one of my other passions, and it's one of the biggest, most important things in the peer movement, in my opinion. In my experience, peer programs tend to go where the supervisor goes and where the team goes. If they're working together, then the team will flourish. If they're not, burnout, turnover, just general work-life misery. You know what I mean? So
I do have something to add to that, because I came here with my boss.
Sure.
I came here with my boss, and that boundaries evolve over time too, so it's super important to always keep an open mind when we work with our supervisors and with the people that are over us. I think it's super important to keep an open mind, and I really get what you're saying, because I think that our lived experience does kind of affect the way we think about that situation. So.
For time's sake, y'all. Yeah, please,
Oh, I
online
just
question.
want to make a quick comment because the state prison is zooming in. And so they heard us talk, and so they said in the chat, yes, we are breaking barriers for incarcerated people, and that they hear the lady that needed peers while incarcerated, and we are working to move across the prison for things like what she needed.
Yes.
It's not just the prisons that we need it in the county jails too.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Right on.
Well, that's a great time to plug the presentation later.
Doing the presentation later today at 2.
For sure.
So anyways, continue on.
Yes. Okay, we're gonna move on for time's sake, y'all. If you do have questions, save them though. We'll try to cover them at the end. That brings us to our peers, right? I'm sure that we all advocate with and for our peers, probably on a daily basis. One of our most important skill sets is helping our peers find their voice to advocate for themselves and supporting them in that until they find that, right? So that can look like talking with a judge or a prosecutor, an attorney, workplaces, doctors, all kinds of things, right? Mediating disagreements with our colleagues on our team and our supervisor, right? To y'all's point around the importance of having a good supervision relationship. And then naming, various things that are happening in our agency that affect us, things like racism, sexism, homophobia, xenophobia, having those kinds of difficult conversations, advocating for ourselves and for our peers, right? If or when we experience those kinds of things.
Brayden, this is basic. I don't know if anybody else can know what xenophobia means.
You're gonna put me on the spot, I'm not
I
gonna
looked
remember.
it up.
Oh, it's
Fear is like of anything that
immigration, I
is
believe.
perceived as being foreign or strange.
Yes, yes, thank you.
Does that encompass it?
Yeah.
I heard the term, but I didn't know what it meant.
For sure. Thank you for that. I appreciate that. This next one's one of my favorites, advocating within our organization. I think there are a million organizations doing incredible work around peer support. And I also think at the same time that peer support is relatively new in our state compared to other helping professions and services that are offered. And so we don't always know the best practices or like the best way to do supervision. To your point, we're kind of all just figuring it out. Sometimes that goes super well and sometimes it doesn't. And so I include this just to say that at times we may need to advocate for change in our workplace policies and procedures, right? That may not be inclusive of my mental health needs or my recovery needs, right? We may need to advocate for flexible or hybrid work schedules that this organization's never done because all of our peers have childcare needs and healthcare needs and just general recovery needs, right? And oftentimes, depending on the organization, that can be super smooth and straightforward and they love it, or they can shut it down immediately, which is super hard to navigate. So advocating within our organization, for me, is one of the most important things we can do, because if we don't have a supportive environment to do this work, the work's already hard enough, right? It's also very rewarding, of course, it's not just hard. But if our organization's not supportive, then this is why, I've seen a lot of turnover in the workforce, people leaving jobs, going into the restaurant industry, construction, making better money, or having 2 or 3 jobs, right? It's because of a lot of these kind of things. And So anyway, soapbox rant over for now. Community advocacy, right? This is where we talk about coalitions and committees. We talk to our colleagues from other organizations, join kind of our power, our resources together, and try to create something on a community level, right? Can y'all think of an example of that in your own community where you've partnered with other entities, other people to change something on a kind of a local level, neighborhoods, cities, counties? Shout it out.
Like Black Lives Matter and gun advocates for anti-gun advocates kind of working together. Like they're not interested in the same thing, but they're able to come together on something that they can kind of both agree on and change it to both working on.
Okay, totally.
Well, I think just the example of the corrections working with peer supports to make the inmates' lives better.
Absolutely. That's like changing an entire system and how it traditionally operates, allowing someone with a literal criminal justice background into a criminal justice setting. It's a huge shift, for sure. It took a lot of advocacy from a lot of people in order to make that happen. Yeah.
Yeah, when I was in a rural area, Emory County, it was like trying to bring harm reduction into that area. And so there was a lot, there was a lot of community partnerships to try and figure out how to get through the barriers.
It's huge in rural areas, right? Because there's so few resources. Have any of y'all heard of the Communities That Care coalitions that are all over the place? That's a great example, right? That's partners and affiliates that may not work together based on their mission, but they come together for the common good of that community, right? Totally. For us, that can look like creating resource lists that we partner with other organizations. I know in my last job we did that a lot. Activity lists, like formal partnerships. We invited in the food bank on our reentry day, right? So we knew a lot of our folks would be coming in that likely needed food services, so we invited the food bank at the same time, right? And then community education, right? If anyone has ever done a presentation like this, but to a non-peer audience, that's a huge way to advocate for the peer movement, right? Just general education. And then policy. Who likes policy work? Legislative advocacy, being involved in that kind of stuff. Everybody. Why? Let me ask you this. Why not? Is it just not interesting? Is it intimidating?
I don't know.
It's never
complicated.
I feel like I don't have to be able to.
Yeah, I'm with you.
Well, I would say the red tape too.
The red tape, okay.
I mean, the red tape is never fun.
No, it's not. It's not. Yeah, in fact,
I believe that that's how a lot of funding occurs and a lot of events and activities occur. A lot of treatment centers occur is because advocating to change the policy.
100%.
And to get into that, I think is very important what I want to do. So.
Totally. I will tell you that in the work that we do, all the barriers that we experience as peers are either caused by a policy or not addressed by a potential policy, right? And we do have the ability, even though it's intimidating, scary, complicated, to educate ourselves and learn that space. I just started learning this like a year and a half ago, and it is intimidating and it is scary. I have imposter syndrome all the time, right? But I learn from the folks that are doing it. Listen, I'll go over the website in a minute, just trying to figure out how simple that can be as an entry point. Because folks are making decisions about our lives and our peers' lives without our input, or without very much of our input, right? So for me, when it was explained to me that way, it changed everything for me because honestly, it pissed me off, right?
I think something that what you're saying, Ed, it's in the process of changing. Evan said it when he was talking to the Senate, I think it was last week or at the beginning of this week. He said, you know, if they're gonna talk about us, there should be one of us at the table. You know, and I think that should apply anywhere, in anything, you know, like, yes, we have a substance use disorder, yes, we have a mental health disorder, or a mental health disorder, whatever, you know what I mean? Like, but if they're gonna talk about us, there should be one of us at the table.
100%. And that commission that Evan is now a part of is based on advocacy. That was a bill from last year that created the Youth Behavioral Health Commission. And there are 3 seats for lived experience on that commission, which I believe is the first of a commission of that size and magnitude that's directly influencing legislation, right? Which is incredible. Other forms of that, right? Medicaid is an advocacy win, in my opinion. Naloxone being able to be sold over the counter, syringe exchange programs that are saving lives all over the place. All of these didn't exist at one point, and now they do, right? So, and then there's obviously a million examples of policy that, depending on your opinion, of course, is harmful or hurtful or doesn't support us as people with experience. I'm gonna save this for time's sake. About a 3-minute video, I'll play it at the end if I have time. It's all about creating systems change, so it's awesome. And I'll try to make sure we can get to that. So this kind of brings us to the community organizing piece. And I kind of weave my educational experience around community organizing with my background as a peer support specialist, right? And for me, it comes down to 3 important kind of skills or topics, right? It's outreach, connections, building relationships with people where we may not have had relationships before, strengthening the ones that we already have, engaging diverse group of stakeholders on an important topic, right? It doesn't have to be just peer supports in this group. It can be business owners in the local community that care because they lost a loved one to an overdose, right? There's all kinds of different, depending on the topic, different ways to interact with and connect with people. Within that, of course, is building those relationships, right? We have to do away with the fact that there are scarcity mindsets in this space, right? Where my idea is the only right idea because I had it, right? I've fallen victim to that. When I have to be able to recognize and understand that different ideas can work often simultaneously, or maybe I'm just not, I didn't know all the details. And we have to be engaged. Again, back to our communities and coalitions conversation. We have to be willing and able to engage with our partners. Go to their events, have lunches and coffee meetings, right, and talk about these issues. A lot of these conversations can start cold calling and cold emailing even, but they should develop into real relationships, right? We have to care about the people that we work with in order to get things done. Because when our relationships are hollow and transactional, people pick up on that. You know what I mean? If I'm only talking to you because I want something out of you for this advocacy issue, you're not going to give me the time of day, most likely, right? And so breaking this down a little bit, starting with this definition, it's looking at the interconnectedness of the systems we interact with to develop community support and create real solutions through goals and collaboration, right? Whether we like it or not, in our jobs, if we're working directly with peers, we're working within several different systems, right? Our peers are potentially involved in the criminal justice system, the public healthcare system, the public benefits of Medicaid and SNAP and those kind of things. And again, back to policy, that's guiding all of that, all of the barriers that we run into. So when we want to create a change of any kind, we want to critically analyze the current kind of landscape, right? We want to ask the questions. We want to talk to the people that are doing the advocacy work already. We want to identify what the issues are. So what are some of the biggest barriers that y'all experience working directly with your peers? Just in general. Shout them out. Yeah.
Stigma.
Stigma. How does that manifest as like a tangible barrier that you can change? I knew we could change stigma for sure. But.
So I kind of have to go into this if we have enough time. So like if I work on a research study at the University of Utah, and so if you guys know about addiction, addiction is a lot like cancer. It has 4 stages. But when you get somebody who's terminally addicted or is going to die from their addiction, like sometimes you get like a nurse or a doctor that has this stigma against, you did this to yourself. That doesn't comprehend like the disorder that goes along with it, So, I mean, you have to fight, like, and a big way that I help to overcome the stigma is I am not afraid to go in and talk. I'm not afraid to go in and stand at the front of a room and tell people my story and let them know that, we do it. We are miracles, there are things that happen, and it takes a lot of hard work and a lot of understanding. So I think stigma is probably one of the biggest ones that I have.
For sure. So we have our issue, right? So our next step would be to what? We want to identify who is most affected, often oppressed by this policy or this issue, and how they're affected by it. And we want to bring them to the table. We want to talk to them directly, right? So often they're going to have the most creative and innovative workarounds and solutions in order to survive under this system, right? And so that brings us to raising awareness, right? If we understand our issue, we kind of have a direction on how we want to build around it. We can go assess what's already going on. There's probably people already working on this issue. Can I connect with them? Can I learn from them and kind of not reinvent the wheel? If no one's working on the issue, then how do I get started, right? At this point, we can start educating the general community, right? Media campaigns, things like that. Present at conferences and trainings, just like this. And then get in the community and talk to people, right? If this is an issue for 5 people, literally the entire community, it's probably not going to take a legislative effort to address the issue. Hopefully, we would be able to do a little more grassroots effort on a local level, right? But if it is an issue that's affecting thousands of people in our community or millions in our country, then that's going to be a much bigger task, right? And we'll change how we kind of move forward from that. And this kind of brings us to like building the power, essentially, building the clouds, if you will, to make the change, right? Who here feels confident in their ability to change Medicaid policy on their own? Of course not. But Medicaid policy changes all the time, and it's often an effort. It's a collaborative effort amongst a diverse group of stakeholders, depending on the level and like it's what level that at.
Well, being on the board of mental health and substance, we as a group advocated for the Medicaid expansion. And that did go through. But we couldn't, we mentioned a few times and nobody really sure. But when everybody starts saying it.
Yeah. Because at the end of the day, right, if we're together, it's obviously a much bigger issue. It's not just affecting me. It's easy to ignore me. It's less easy to ignore 10 people. It's even less easy to ignore 1,000 or 10,000, right? Is there a hand?
Yeah, I just, right now, I know that VOA, and we're reaching out to different, I work for VOA, and we're reaching out to different organizations about fentanyl. Because because it is having such an impact on substance use. At detox, we're seeing more reversals. Library engagement team seeing more reversals, so we're trying to organize so that we can figure out how to work for the ability to save more lives.
Yeah, together, right? Identify solutions together. That's a great point. Yeah. So my biggest recommendation, for sure, just based on my own lived experience in the last year and a half of doing this kind of work, is don't be afraid to shoot your shot with anyone, with a legislator, with somebody that you look up to in the community. If you can get your hands on their email, meet them at an event, shoot your shot, explain your message, what you're trying to do, and just go for it. The worst thing that they're going to do is not reply to your email. And then you can try again later. You meet them in person or whatever, right?
Well, like that kind of like was going along with what I was going to say, like without the committees and without the advocating and without any of that, if you don't take your shot with your own voice, like, because I mean, how many times in a room is one person speaks up and there's more than one or two that feel the same way, but without that one person speaking up, the conversation doesn't go anywhere.
Absolutely. Everything that we're talking about always started out as an idea somewhere, right? Having a group through efforts like these, 100%. Yeah, great point. At this point, we want to identify, find and create our solutions, right? Again, starting with the people most affected, generally these big issues in the communities that they're affecting, they've found ways to survive within that context, right? So they have ideas for solutions to these issues that we may never even think of, right? Again, it's that lived experience of going through a tough thing that often breeds and fosters the innovative ideas that lead to the solutions, right? And so we can start there, talk to those folks, talk to people with expertise on the subject. They've been working in this specific advocacy space for years. They obviously know more than I do in this space, but I'm just entering it. And so I find mentors, I find people to learn from and work with. One of the most important things, kind of to your point, if you're brainstorming these ideas, this is kind of a scenario where there's no dumb ideas, no dumb questions, right? If we're brainstorming ideas, you gotta be open and transparent and willing to try anything. Because you never know which one of those ideas weren't said because someone was afraid of being made fun of or made to feel shameful. to say something much more inappropriate, but that's not. And then generally in a brainstorming session, work through a few different iterations of that process, brainstorming ideas, picking which ones work best. Identify your 3 to 5 most realistic, there are no SMART goals, right? Your most realistic, attainable, I guess we're not here yet, but kind of what's your timeline, identify where your 3 to 5 best solutions might be, and go from there. Then we kind of get into the planning section. Earlier we were talking about a timeline, right? How do we move forward? So then you put your group together, you put all your amazing ideas together, and you start planning, right? What's the ultimate goal? What's the desired outcome? Be very specific, be very time-oriented, and then break that larger goal down into your smaller steps, right? Just like we do with our peers. No different. We can break that into more achievable, more attainable, and realistic steps to get us to our long-term goal. If we want to change Medicaid policy, we're not going to do that overnight. How do we get there, right?
I still don't know how you got so many.
Who wants
Somebody
that?
actually answered.
I'm Medicaid.
Oh, I didn't. Then this one is, to our earlier point around accountability, this one's key, right? In these groups, you want to be very intentional about assigning tasks and following through, which can be hard, right? All of us are very busy. If I show up to my next committee meeting and I didn't do my thing that I was assigned to do, what are the consequences, right? We're not going to go after each other. So there's got to be some measure of accountability that everyone agrees on to ensure that the work gets done. Going back to our earlier point around disengaging and unplanned groups, right? Then run it through your SMART goal process. I'm sure we're all familiar with that, right? Is this something that we can do? Are the steps in order? Do we have everything that we need? And then go out and do the work, right? This is where we go into collective action. What actions are needed by the next meeting and who's responsible? How do we do that? Each partner, whoever has those assigned tasks, works on completing them. Maybe you check in between meetings. It's one of my favorite things to do. It keeps people involved, keeps people engaged. Especially if that meeting's like every other month or worse, like every 6 months, right? If a task isn't completed, why? What else is needed? Was it because I just dropped the ball or was it because I ran into a barrier? And then follow up and follow through. This is huge if you find yourself in a leadership position in these groups. Follow up with the people that you have assigned tasks to and make sure that they have what they need, right? We all forget stuff, right? It's just a matter of making sure that we remember. So these last few pieces are really an introduction to getting involved in legislation, right? This is how I was introduced to it. It's a very easy way to start getting involved, learning. Doesn't have to be an overnight process, but are some examples of the legislative website. It's le.utah.gov. It looks really complicated when you get to it, but once you get in there and get to know the tools, it's very easy. So basically, on the homepage, there's ways to get to these dog pictures here. They're like little links to all the important stuff. What I would do is go in, make an account. All you gotta do is plug in your email, pretty basic. Then you can find the schedules. Like during the session, it's insane, right? I'm sure we've all heard that. There's meetings all the time, but right now they're doing interim stuff, right? You can go to a meeting this week or next week. They just got the members of the Behavioral Health Commission approved this week and last week, right? So get on there, check out the schedule, and start to get familiar with the different tools and what works best for you. You can track bills that are currently being run, so the things that are important to you, you can track them and have emails sent to you about when the meetings are, so you can go show up virtually or in person. It's really, as far as from what I've heard about other legislative websites and other places, it's actually pretty awesome. I'm not familiar with those myself, but I have found this, once I got in there, started clicking through and familiarizing myself, it got pretty friendly. On the subject of committees, the legislative body uses committees, right? There's Health and Human Services is a popular one for us in this space, but there's also like business, there's education, there's workforce improvement, workforce services, something like that. So not all of the bills that affect us will be in Health and Human Services, but a lot of them will. So you can follow that committee and stay up on when they're talking about specific bills. On here, you can find the agenda in the middle there. That'll tell you which bills are being talked about on what day, as well as the links to join the live meeting. And all of the legislators who are on there as well. You can always attend in person or virtual. Not all meetings will allow public comment, but most will. So if any one of us can go to a legislative meeting and provide public comment on an issue. You don't have to know everything about the subject, but you should know some about it. You should be informed. And it could just be as simple as, I'm a person with this experience, and this is how this would affect me, or already does affect me. Right?
Yeah. You answer it.
Okay. Love that.
It was the comment thing.
Okay. What I would say is if you really do want to get involved, especially in this next session, get on there, schedule out, like put some of these on your calendar and just attend and listen. Just listen, absorb, take it all in, get a feel for how they operate, how the advocates are out there operating, because Evan and others, Julie Hartle and all the people that advocate in the space are doing this already. That's who we can learn from, right? That's at least my way of learning is to just get in there and listen. And when I feel comfortable enough, I'll get in there and check, right? Reading a bill, this is probably the part that everyone's intimidated by and scared by, right? I still am, and I read tons during this last session. It's super technical, super complicated language, like all the time. But what I will say is if you go into a specific bill, this is SB 27 that's on here, that created the Behavioral Health Commission last year. These words on this digital paper created that commission and will hopefully influence a lot of behavioral health policy in the next few years, right? And it's just words. So like what I would say, the beginning section of it is kind of a short form. Read the short form, see if it fits kind of what you're trying to vibe with. And then if you're feeling brave, get into the meat and potatoes of it. But that often can be thousands of lines and super complicated. So last up, your representatives. This is one I'm still trying to kind of work up my own ability to do well. On there, on the main page, you can plug in your address and it will automatically give you your legislators, your representative and your senator, right? It'll give you their address. Don't go to their house probably. Stick with the phone number and the email. But when you reach out to them, this is a great way for like community organizing, right? A lot of people can rally around a specific bill and organize like a text dump or an email dump and reach out to all of their representatives all at the same time to let them know that this issue is good or not good or whatever. But know your ask. If you're going to reach out to them, know what you're asking for on a specific issue. Do your research. You can write letters, right? That's a lot of people will come together on like a Google Doc, write a big long letter, everyone signs at the bottom, and then they'll all send it in to their respective representatives, right?
Isn't that a form of a petition?
Probably. I don't actually know the answer to that, but I'm sure it is. Yeah. Probably, if you take nothing else away from this, it's this. If you're going to do legislative advocacy, make sure that you're representing peer support well. Don't go up there trauma dumping all of our lived experience that we haven't processed yet on these poor people, right? They're just human beings. And if we go up there, we know how to use our lived experience in a way that's effective, professional, and concise. We're using the right language, right? Person-first language is huge, especially in this kind of space. We can go up there and feel confident in our message if we know what we're talking about and we know what we're asking for. And always, band together, work on this stuff together, find a friend, go to a meeting, listen, learn, and in no time, in a month or two, you'll probably feel confident enough to show up to a meeting, and maybe even say a few words. That's how we start, and then later on, we can get much more involved in issues, for sure. So, unfortunately, I talk way too much. This happens in every presentation that I do, but this is how you can get in touch with me. You can join our network if you haven't already for peer support, the Utah Peer Network. Get newsletters, trainings, events, webinars. And I think that's it.